countries, including development program, accuses 3 of the world's biggest credit rating agencies of bias against some African countries, including
owns $25 billion.
Also this morning, house-turned mining site sinks underground at Odumase in the Ashanti region, barely a year after a similar incident resulted in the death of a pregnant woman in the same area. We have details for you shortly. Plus, Wolopokuwari School push aside love and go hard against their female affiliates St. Louis Senior High School to retain the regional championship trophy, or they will soften their stance as a duo clash in the Ashanti regional qualifiers. We have the details in the ongoing regional qualifiers of the NSMQ. And also, as part of this package, we'll take you live to the UPSA Kofi Ohene Kunedu Auditorium for a public lecture on artificial reproductive technologies. We'll have details of that and also business coming up shortly. My name is Aishi Ibrahim. Do stay for details. The United Nations Development Program is raising red flags over what they describe as bias on the part of 3 of the world's biggest credit rating agencies against some African countries, including the Republic of Ghana. In its latest report on lowering the cost of borrowing in Africa, the UNDP says the continued downgrade of Ghana's economy is based on less subjective assessments and is costing the state and other African countries some $74 billion. With this amount of money saved, it is more likely that Ghana may not have signed up for a $3 billion bailout from the IMF. Foreign Affairs correspondent Blessed Soga has an exclusive interview with Ahuna Eziakonwa, the regional director of the UNDP, which shed more light on the report. He joins us with more. Blessed, which rating agencies have been cited and why is the UNDP accusing them of bias?
Aisha, it's a good time to be talking to you as we look forward to that interview with the regional head of the United Nations Development Program later tonight on Foreign Affairs. The interaction centered on the annual meetings of the Afrexim Bank, which is focused on the theme of building prosperity for the continent or for Africans. Now, a key concern has been the emerging debt crisis that many countries on the African continent are presented with. Of course, the UNDP is one of the key development partners for countries such as Ghana and other developing nations around the world. So I sought to get the perspective of the UNDP on attaining the US SDGs, which part of the target focuses on not leaving anyone behind by 2030 as far as the Sustainable Development Goals is concerned. And given this imminent debt crisis that is facing most of the African nations, there are fears that we may not be able to meet these targets. Now, when I put that to the UNDP, a key concern that came up has got to do with financing for these developing nations. And it's instructive to note that the UNDP has carried out a research which is pointing out that there seems to be bias on the part of 3 key top rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and they talk about one other in the report, which they say that cumulatively, if you put together the way they go about their reporting, they shut the Ghanaian economy out of the international financial markets. And these matters appear to affect investments within our economy. For instance, they point to what they describe as pro-cyclicality of some issues or matters that are less subjective and should not necessarily matter to the economic metrics. For instance, we know that Ghana is surrounded by countries that are facing insurgency. That's a fact. But for the UNDP, these are matters that should not necessarily be on the front burner in shutting Ghana out of the international market. And these are some of the reasons for which they believe that if you take away access to $75 billion, which will potentially give them an upper hand, then they may not necessarily have to go for a bailout program.
Blessed, we know that President Akufo-Addo for some time now has raised concerns over how Ghana is being shut out of the international market. What's his reason for this?
At this very same annual meetings that I'm talking about, the AfriExim meetings, president actor and international actors, just to try and find a way of building a proper source of finance for the continent. And as part of his concerns, he also pointed out to this alleged bias. That's how we need to treat it as of now, because there are some on the other divide who say that if you look at Ghana's economic performance, you don't need an expert to tell you that we're not doing well. But based on this report, it appears that there's some leaning towards what it is that the president has been talking about, that consistently there appears to be a stereotype or a bias against countries such as Ghana. Let's listen to him.
Speaking at the annual meetings of the AfriExim Bank in Accra, President Akufo-Addo said Ghana's economic difficulties were compounded by the downgrades from the rating agencies. According to him, the country, which had become the favorite child of bondholders, was suddenly shut out of the international capital markets.
And I can comfortably and convincingly say this. As the AU champion for African financial institutions and leader of a country which recently had to deal with one of the most difficult periods in its post-independent history, difficulties which were exacerbated by the reckless behavior of rating agencies that engaged
Blessed, we know emphatically that Ghana is not in a good economic position. Is the UNDP actually saying that this should not?
They believe that when you're looking at the factors that should matter, some of the obvious situations and situations that countries, for instance, such as Ghana, cannot change, should not matter in the reason for which you would downgrade us. But I put that to Ezenkoa, who happens to be the regional director for the United Development Program. And just as President Akufo-Addo is using that harsh word of reckless rating on the part of the ratings agency, they seem to suggest that, well, it may not be a case that they are reckless in the ratings, except to say that there are less subjective matters that should be should not matter when it comes to the ratings that are given to countries such as Ghana. And based on this, we're losing to the tune of $75 billion US. Potentially that could save us from not going to the IMF, for instance, for a $3 billion bail.
An issue, but there are ways to make finances cheaper for the continent. That's something we have to look at, and we've been looking at it at UNDP. For instance, we just did a study on the cost of borrowing and the credit rating bias that puts African countries at a disadvantage. If we can deal with that, you save $75 billion a year for just 16 countries that we surveyed.
Are you saying this is becoming a reality? Because our president raised that during the AfriExim meetings, where there's this continental push for our own standards and ratings. Is that the solution to the problem?
That's part of the solution. I mean, you will always have to participate in the international rating agencies because they have a standard.
Because we can't do without them.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think that you can influence how they rate Africa, and it comes back to perceptions.
Well, the full interview is later on Foreign Affairs with Blessed to go on the JoyNews channel at 10 p.m. You make a date. Let's now take you live to UPSA's Kofi Ohene Kunedo Auditorium, where there's a public lecture on artificial reproductive technologies, ethical and legal considerations through an African prism.
Titled Labor Laws in Ghana. We must applaud him as a South African for his investment of time into the development of such an important book on the labor laws of Ghana. Law is never a straight line and is to be highly commended for his dedication and commitment to labor laws that extends beyond the shores of his native South Africa. We have no doubt that this book will shed a bright light on the intricacies of labor laws within our beloved nation. I also consider this book is a valuable resource that will serve as a guide and reference for students, researchers, and professionals alike, and we express our gratitude for its invaluable contribution. As an institution dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, we firmly believe in the power of intellectual discourse and exchange. This event provides a unique opportunity for us to engage in discussions that transcend boundaries and delve into the nuances of artificial reproductive